Sorry for the delay, but thank you all for waiting, those in person and those on Zoom. I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting is on Tuesday, May 9th at 7:30 PM in the board meeting room. I do not have any chairperson report this evening. We'll keep this moving. So Michelle, we will move over to public comment.
Good evening. If anyone in person would like to participate, please wait for the chair to acknowledge you. You have up to 3 minutes. Please state your name and address.
Anyone for public comment? Please come up to the podium.
Hello, my name is Catherine Perez. I live at 138 Silvermine Avenue. I am a school psychologist at Middlesex.
Could you bring the mic down a little?
Sure.
Is that, yes, thank you so
Okay,
much.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm a school psychologist. I've been a school psychologist now for 10 years. The majority of my experience has been in the New York City public schools. I've been with Middlesex now for 6 months. I also have a background as a preschool teacher, as a parent coordinator, and I'm also a parent of a student with a disability. So the reason for my statement is I feel like there's a false narrative that Darren is losing staff due to poaching from other districts, and that the people are leaving because they're leaving for better paying jobs. And I'm here to tell you that that is not the truth. That the reason that people are leaving is due to poor leadership and adequate support, leading to depersonalization and burnout. In the past 6 months that I've been working at Middlesex, they have lost 5 staff members and 6 if you include the school psychologist who recently resigned after only 2 years at working at Middlesex. This is a red flag. There's data in exit summaries and burnout rates that have been reported in the DBT meetings that have been ignored. I urge the parents of Darien to hold their leaderships accountable for their role in the mass exodus of good, hardworking, and caring staff to other districts. It's your tax dollars, it's your children, and what happens next will be up to you. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking. Anyone else for public comment in person? Michelle, do we have anyone on Zoom?
If anyone online would like to participate, please use the raise hand icon.
Can you see people? I can't see people.
There are no raised hands at this time.
All right, good. We'll have it at the end. We'll keep moving. Dr. Adley, Superintendent's report.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending this evening. I want to thank, first of all, thank Christina Mauricio, who's the department chair of the world language, and the staff, because they took a wee trip to the Galapagos Islands over the break, and they had a wonderful time. There were special 9 days. The kids were wonderful ambassadors for Darien Public Schools, and the staff did a terrific job for them, which is really once in a lifetime memory. There is 2B pictures we have somewhere in there. I don't see them, but oh, they are up. Okay. I think one's on the island and one is standing on the equator, if I have it correctly. But thank you to those staff members. These things don't happen without people giving up their time and their talents, personal and professional time. There was about 24 or so people had attended, but thank you. And we look forward to, I think it's Italy in the summer. I also want to congratulate Mrs. Mauricio for being selected to present at the National World Language Conference next spring. She is presenting on the work of instructional rounds within world languages and the World Language Department. So congratulations, and the opportunity to talk about instruction with their peers at an international level. Also, again, congratulations to the music department for the recognition just last week from the NAM Foundation. I think this is our 3rd year in a row right now where we're recognized for the arts, and we've talked many times here about the performing and visual arts. They're just outstanding, and we continue to gain that recognition, and the program is thriving, and we thank them for all of their efforts, both our talented teachers, and if you have the opportunity to see our young musicians, they are certainly talented. So congratulations to them too. I won't speak too much about Wellness Week. It's on at the high school because I think we have got a student, and we also have got Dr. Dad who might be talking about it. And it culminates with the Out of Darkness Walk. Again, I'll leave that. If there are questions after the event, I'll speak to them if you need more details. The Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, that search will be commencing with tonight's appointment, anticipated appointment by the board of the actual committee itself. Dr. Dad will be doing a presentation on May 4th with Julie Droller on the connection and nexus between mental health and social emotional learning, and that will be at the middle school auditorium at 9:30 a.m. We have next week, there are a variety of HHR, Henley, Holmes and Royal parental meetings that are taking place for updates on the actual project. Each of the school projects will be given an update on that. May 8th, just a reminder, is the RTM action on the budget. This is a testing season for our students and our staff. So we started today with SBAC and the SBAC mathematics at the middle school. I think AP starts a two-week run for you. Yep, 2 weeks. Next week we start. So we've basically got about 3 or 4 weeks to wrap up a lot of the assessments. So good luck to all our students. Just wanted to mention that the middle school graduation is June 13th at 5 o'clock. For those of us who have administrative professionals, secretaries or otherwise, we celebrate them tomorrow. So we thank them we certainly could not function without them. There is a sort of co-sponsored with Thriving Youth and Middlesex Parent Organization and the DHS Parent Organization on a topic of the emotional lives of teenagers, raising connected, capable and compassionate adolescents. That will take place at the Darien High School auditorium on May 10th. And just a couple of notes about the board committees. Facilities will not meet this week, and the communications start time coming out tomorrow. The communications committee will meet at 8 a.m. On Friday. And the calendar for May will have the other dates of the other board meetings.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Adley. We'll move on to approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve the following minutes of the special meeting held? What's that? Oh, I did. So I'm looking right at you, Swaha. So thank you. Student representative reports. Swaha, good to see you this evening. Can you pull that a little closer to you? Is it on, Swaha?
Hello? Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Much better.
Okay.
Thanks.
So the Darien High School PA is co-sponsoring this. And so throughout the week, there's going to be planned activities and speakers in the Wellness Center. And I had a chance to go in briefly during my lunch today, and I saw decent attendance from students. And there were snacks and stuff, so it looked nice. And student government election results came out earlier last week. So they're going to be the students leading our student body next year or the next school year. And tickets for senior prom are officially on sale, and senior prom is on May 12th. So that's coming up as well. And last Friday, incoming ninth graders visited the high school to get introduced to the school. And this was a very student-run event. So current students talked about their experiences and what they liked and all of that. And finally, the Out of the Darkness Walk is this Sunday to spread mental health awareness. And like Dr. Adley mentioned, AP exams are coming up. So that's a major event in most upperclassmen's lives right now.
Thank you, Swaha. Nice update. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, I do believe that I think this is the first time they've had an Out of Darkness walk at a school, at a high school in particular. So it's nice that
Great.
Our administration support staff organize that, and our students. So we look forward to that.
Move on to approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve the following minutes of the special meetings held on March 28th, 2023, and minutes of the regular meeting held on March 28th, 2023. May I have a motion? Dennis, second by Julie. All those in favor? Thank you. We'll move on to board committee reports. John?
Last Thursday, the finance committee met, and you'll see a transfer coming your way. Also discussion of the surplus, year-to-date surplus, but we also talked about the draft new budget calendar as part of that, which I believe we're going to cover later as an agenda item as well.
Good. Thank you, John. Sarah?
The curriculum subcommittee met on the 6th, right before spring break. We talked about social studies and English. If board members have not listened to that meeting, I suggest you do. We are potentially going to talk about shifting the 8th grade English course as well as the 9th grade English course and the designation of accelerated versus honors. So that's something that'll be coming to the full board. So I would appreciate if everybody would get up to speed before we come to that comes to the table.
Thank you.
HHR continues with construction drawings in that process. We have a big meeting on Thursday, so I'll have more of an update next time we meet.
Uxbridge had a meeting last week. That continued to be, for the most part, on track. We have to look at some weather challenges when it comes to paving and finishing up and grading. And also we're at the point now where we're doing kind of a deep dive review on all the contingency accounts. But overall, that project continues to be in good shape. Dave.
The policy subcommittee met on April 21st, last Friday. We'll be bringing forward a first read of a number of different policies as agenda item 8G.
Thank you, Dave. We'll move on to presentations and discussions. Discussion and possible appointment of interview committee for Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Adley.
Taking into consideration the board's discussion the last time we spoke about this, and the idea of involving focus groups and so on. So you see there steps 1 through 10 delineate the actual process. The board representation is the chair, vice chair, and secretary. So step 3 is the focus groups that are actually scheduled to commence on this Friday. You can see the respective steps in the actual process. The interview committee itself, you can see number 8, that's a composition of the interview committee itself. It's a fairly aggressive timeline to bring the final candidate to the board here on May 15th or thereabouts. We may or may not have to schedule a special meeting for that. I'm happy to talk to any of the particular processes. You're familiar with Patrice McCarthy, Executive Director of CABE. She's worked with the board every year now. She will be here to actually conduct the actual focus groups. And with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions or otherwise, and hopefully the board feels okay about appointing the actual interview committee as named.
Thank you, Dr. Adley. Yeah, I think this is a good tight line. It's a tight timeline, but that's where we are at this point in time. I think we thought long and hard around the focus groups and having a facilitator. So I appreciate Patrice McCarthy coming and doing that. I think we're including kind of all the folks that need to be involved as we go through this process. I know the job has been posted and resumes are coming into the district. So I know that resume review process has already started. So I think we have a tight but a good timeline. And I think we have the right representation from a focus group standpoint, which I think will inform as we go through and look at candidates and go through the application and interview process. So with that, any board questions? John.
It's more of a comment just for the public that they know that part of the interview committee includes the 3 officers of the board.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so I
Yes.
think that's important for the public to know. And also, I guess if you're not a PTO parent or CESP chair, that any parent can probably log their comments or, desires, what they'd want to see in an assistant superintendent via email, public comment throughout this, right? I mean,
Sure.
we'd love to solicit feedback from the broader community as well.
Yeah, I think going through your PTO reps, going through the CDSP or sending emails to the board. I guess it's a good question. When will we know from a public standpoint, Alan, who the PTO representatives are?
We will know who they are tomorrow.
Okay, good. And if we could get that information out, I think that would help for people that may want to funnel feedback through them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Good. Sarah.
I was just gonna say, similar to John, I will happy to solicit information. I've talked to a bunch of people on the board, a few people on the board already about what they're hoping to see, but please, if you have not shared your views with one of the 3 of us, please make sure to do that before Friday when we meet with Patrice. And also to the public, please send us an email
Yep.
if you have an opinion. We need to hear it, or we want to hear it.
Jill.
Also, people are welcome to call us.
Yes.
You know, we're happy to take phone calls too, because sometimes it's easier in a conversation.
Dave.
Similar, if there was any way, and I know it's probably unwieldy to get parents just broadly to come in and talk to Patrice. I think it's great that we're going to solicit emails and phone calls and feedback, but it would have been nice to see in addition to what seems like a fairly robust process and have more public comments. So hopefully people have a chance to get their opinions heard and what we're looking for moving forward.
Thanks. Dennis.
Will there be a write-up of the focus groups by Patrice afterwards? And is that just to the subcommittee, or is that to the board, or to the public, or whom?
So the feedback from the focus group, there will be a summary given on May 1st to the actual interview committee. There's a pre-meet of the interview committee to go over HR stuff from Marge, and also to hear the feedback actually from the actual focus group itself.
Julie.
So there will be
Yeah.
some narrative.
Julie.
I'm assuming at step 10, the final interview, we're anticipating one candidate coming to us at that stage of the game. Is that
We're intending to, but perhaps not. We'll see.
okay? And with that question, will we be provided with some sort of summarized feedback on what you all were looking for working through this process? I know we'll have given input into it, but I think it would be helpful for us to review that information before we meet with candidates at the end of the process.
Sure, we can accommodate that.
It's kind of the normal process. I mean, Dr. Ellie in the past has given a summary of how this person got there and why. So
Perfect.
over and above their resume.
I
Yes,
guess,
John.
yeah, sorry, is there any way the board could see the feedback from the focus groups earlier than that last meeting, or would that somehow damage the process?
I think for right now, I think based on that a search committee is formed, that information would stay within that search committee.
Okay.
Good. May I have a motion to appoint the interview committee for the position of Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction? Dennis, second by Julie. All those in favor? That is that unanimous? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We will move on to mental health and wellness update by Dr. Dad. Welcome, Dr. Dad. Good to see you. What day is this? Day
30.
across the 30-day
That's
threshold.
including the break, so I don't know if we're going to include that or not.
I would like to officially welcome Dr. Dad to her first board meeting. Well, not technically first board meeting, you've been here before, but certainly the first presentation. It's been a delight to have Dr. Dad with us. She's in much demand, I can assure you. And I think what she has to share tonight will give you a sense of who she is, and she's a level of expertise, empathy, and a presence with her that is befitting this particular position. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. Welcome again. Thank you for all of your work thus far, and welcome to the board again.
My pleasure, and good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight about mental health and student wellness. And before I begin, I just would like to express the sincere gratitude for the support and the steps that you all as a board, Dr. Adley, the community, the staff have taken to really prioritize student mental health. I think it's an opportunity. I think this position as Director of Mental Health is both unique and necessary. And I think the fact that Darien has taken this step really allows it to be a model for other local communities and even beyond that. So I'm grateful for your time and all the steps it took to get to this point. All right, so in thinking about this presentation, I thought it would be helpful to focus on kind of the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days of my tenure in this role and kind of what the goals are, what I've already done, kind of what I'm looking forward to in the future. And while I will not go through every one of those 90 days, I do think that day one, I left with a sense of inspiration. I walked around, I had the ability, courtesy of Shirley and Scott, to tour all 7 buildings, and I actually went to Fitch as well. Thank you both, because I logged 9,016 steps, which is comparable to my trip to Disney World. So thank you for that. Beyond that, I got to get a sense of the schools, just the caliber of the staff that you have, the connection, the commitment to really the students. It was really a pleasure to see those authentic relationships and just the talented staff that you have. So like I said, I'm not going to go through every day. That was day 1. Also, thank you to Dr. Adley and Dr. Tramberg for just checking in on me. How are things going? If I need anything, it's been much appreciated. So for the first 30 days, I really focused on listening and learning. You can't learn without listening. So I've really just been absorbing primarily with the staff and with the administrators, because that makes the most sense and that's the most direct access, kind of getting a sense of Darien, what it's like to be a student here, to be a staff member. Also recognizing all the tremendous work that's been done up until this point around mental health. There are such strong community relationships. I've really focused on really learning. So now, day 35, I'm transitioning into the 60-day term of really focusing on further assessment and aligning. So having more thorough conversations on assessing need, meeting with smaller groups, also really connecting the dots between all of the wonderful mental health supports that we have, the social emotional learning programs, the community commitment, different agencies, and really trying to connect those dots and look for, where there may be gaps and where there's real significant strengths. And then in the next 90 days, which takes us about to the end of the school year, really focusing on building on that learning and assessing and implementing. Sorry. Thanks. It's got a mind of its own. No, that's okay. That's okay. So engaging and implementing. So implementing some of the things based on the learning and assessing that I've done over the first 30 and 60, 90 days. Also looking at that in terms of aggregating data, where is there a need, and really getting into some more kind of granular understanding of where there's need. So when I look at the first 30 days, the focus, like I mentioned, is with the staff, because I've gotten to know them. I was able to tour all the schools, like I mentioned. I got a sense of what a student assistance team looks like at the high school, which was a great opportunity to see the interaction between the counselors, the administrators, even the nursing staff. From there, it spawned a conversation about how do nurses respond to mental health crises, and then professional development needs that might be there. I also presented a couple times already to the high school staff, realizing that, last spring was a really challenging time for all of them, and looking at resilience through connection and skills with a small group of the staff. And then more recently with the entire staff, I presented on maintaining motivation and reducing burnout, simply because we know that education is one of the top 3 professions where burnout is high. And what are the strategies and skills that we can continue to foster to not only recruit talented people, but help them remain resilient? In addition, I had the opportunity to spend some time the week of the 31st and support the staffing in the Wellness Center, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more when I get to students, but I will say that was a highlight. I think that's such a unique space and opportunity to really foster resilience. I enjoyed watching a group of teenage boys not even look at their phone and play a very intense game of Uno. I just felt like this is what we talk about resilience and connection and self-care. I think there's a lot of opportunity to maximize the Wellness Center, as you had mentioned, snacks. People love snacks and feeding their soul. So it was a great opportunity to see the students and see the interaction with some of the staff and the students. I also had an opportunity to meet with certain groups, including the lacrosse coach, to identify if there's any continued need related to grief and loss, and how to plan ahead for that. And then for the first time, I got to meet all of the academic and instructional leadership team, which included principals, department chairs, where we really had this wonderful conversation about the power of moments and connection. It was a great opportunity to meet everyone. So that was the first part of my 30 days. The focus, as I mentioned, was on staff, I'm excited to present at the administrators retreat with an understanding of how all administrators can kind of integrate mental health awareness into whatever work that they do. This past Friday, I had an opportunity to host all of the school psychologists and social workers. It was a wonderful opportunity because we know that they are on the front lines of the student mental health, to get a gauge of where we are, what might be needed, what's working. And we have a lot of newer staff. Many of them just hadn't been in the same room together, maybe meeting. So creating that sense of community, because we know that that builds resilience even in our mental health workers. And then I would say it was week 3, the focus shifted a little bit on onboarding and assisting with onboarding the school security officers. It was a great opportunity. I had a chance to work closely with Leanne as the director of security and really understand kind of what would be most helpful as the officers transitioned into their new role and understanding the mental health needs of our students. And then I also had a chance to spend some time at Fitch Academy and really assess kind of their needs as a unique learning environment. So as a brief overview, these are 3 of the presentations that I conducted along with Shirley and Dr. McCarthy. Just to acclimate the school security officers, what is ruler? If I see a mood meter as I'm walking around, what does that mean? How might I see people trying to help students stay regulated and stay safe? So first it was an overview. And I will say, if you are interested in any of these, we can forward kind of the presentations to you as well. And then we did an overview of kind of emotional disorders in childhood and adolescence. What are the common things that we see in schools? Say there's a student who maybe has OCD. What does it look like for them getting in the building? You might see some ritualized behavior. How do you respond? Things like that. And then safe school climate and bullying prevention. So that's 30 days with the staff. And then a little bit less with students and families. My goal is, as the time continues, I'll have more opportunity to interact with students and families. Again, as I mentioned, the Wellness Center, there was tremendous, I got to see, you know, the therapy dogs coming in, the warm cookies coming in, watching kids make friendship bracelets. I also had a chance to meet with the Board of Ed student representative. John sat with me for a while just to talk about what it's like to be a student at Darien High School, what it was like. And he mentioned that he grew up in Darien, so all the way through elementary and middle school, because I think the voice of the student is just so critical when we're thinking about mental health. He also helped me identify where are clusters or groupings of students where I could meet a little bit more and get a sense of what it's like from different experiences, whether you're into athletics or the arts or performing. So that's on my 60 days to meet with those groups. There
I
was
think
an
there's a good hierarchy in the cafeteria you can figure out.
I
to
did
where
make
the
it sure.
s-
I
where the
know.
Seniors sit.
I got a little sense like it was like, it doesn't matter what decade it is. The cafeteria is a great sampling of student behavior,
It is,
right? It was
it is.
amazing. I got to know it. So I'll probably hang out there a little bit. There was also a wonderful Katie Southward, a former Darien High School alumni who came this past week and really did an amazing presentation for the art students about the integration of emotions and color and how you can use that in a therapeutic way. And she had the students so engaged, and they created this tremendous piece of art that I just really, you could see it just pulled students in. And then in terms of families, I was able to attend every PTO at the elementary level. So when the SSOs were introduced, I know sometimes parents had questions. How do I talk to my student around things like school violence in a developmentally appropriate way? So I was there just to field questions and also afterwards help with communication that you might be able to have with your student. So I'll figure out which, there we go, how to aim. And then with the community, I've been so impressed with all of the supports within the community and the intersection of that with the school system. I can't say, even working with so many other districts, that I've seen such a comprehensive relationship. So I had the opportunity to meet with Human Services, Ally and Cynthia, really gave me an overview of the range of services provided to individuals, including anything if there's food insecurity, how they help families, which obviously food insecurity would impact your mental health, your ability to concentrate, but also just in general, what they've done kind of with the task force. I met with a Thriving Youth Task Force as well, which I like to kind of see data and learn more. So they shared with me some of the previous results with the survey that they conducted. I also learned a little bit more about their recent community conversation with the students, which was really insightful. They asked the students in focus groups, you know, what is it you wish you could tell the adults in your community about mental health? And it was a real authentic conversation. I appreciated hearing that. Teen Talk. I really am excited about Teen Talk coming to the high school. I had a chance to meet with Denise, and I had previously worked in my prior district around kids in crisis and their services and their supports. I think even after I met with her, I also talked with other districts, Westport, Greenwich, with regards to how they use Teen Talk, given that we know there is an increase in mental health need across the board. And there was some unique perspective about how the Teen Talk counselors could support the work that's already happening in the building. And they also offered some unique opportunities, such as meeting with students before school hours or after school hours, which I think is helpful if you have a student who maybe has some school avoidance in the morning, and that's a flexibility. So I was happy to hear about that, and I'm excited about that opportunity. In the 60 days, I'm going to assess more with the middle school and see how they are with regards to that need. Like I said, day 35, I've had a little bit of focus on the high school and the SSOs, and next week I'm in the middle school. One other thing, and I promise 30 days is the long one, 60 and 90 hasn't happened yet, so it won't be as lengthy. I had a prior relationship in a professional relationship with regards to RESC, and there's a individual there who's done a lot of work on trauma and fostering resilience, and she's working at the state level because the state is also looking at trauma-informed schools, and it may be a possible mandate coming down in the next few years. So I coordinated a conversation with her, myself, and Scott, and we talked about kind of her coming in and doing an informal training and really kind of giving some overview around what the state is thinking with trauma-informed care. So now I finished 30 days. I'm gonna go back to 60 days, staff. Michelle, I don't know if it's, you go back one maybe? Thank you. Great. I really would like to attend each buildings faculty meetings. I mentioned I'm going to be at the middle school next week. I'm going to do a presentation, but I'm also going to get a sense of kind of what the conversations are in the middle school. I also want to really look at a survey regarding school climate and professional development learning needs. As we talk about mental health, we know that collectively mental health needs have grown. And at the same time, how do teacher training programs haven't rose and kind of evolved at the same level or pace at which the needs have grown. So we know that there's a gap in professional learning. How do I diffuse some of the issues I see in my classroom around mental health? So really looking at kind of what their needs are and assessing whether that's an internal training or external consultation. That's my goal for 60 days. More recently, which I'm excited to do, I like to be out in the schools. I'm not one to sit in my office. I want to be visible. And more recently, I've been excited because my phone rings and people know I'm there and they'll ask for consultation if there's something going on within their building or with their student. I'd like to continue to be able to provide that consultation. And along with that, I've decided to offer some office hours. So whether that's an SSO who might see one of those behaviors and not sure how to respond, to reach out to me, or anyone else with a teacher. Coordinate monthly meetings for psychologists and social workers. I'm also, as I mentioned, professional development presentations to the nursing staff. There really was, how do we assess if this is a mental health crisis or if it's more transient? So I'm going to do some professional development around that, and at the middle school as well. That All right, and for students in the next, I'm not going to do the math, 25 more days. Connecting with group leaders, as I mentioned, John helped me identify some of the groups. I'm going to really focus on kind of meeting with them and getting an understanding of multiple perspectives of what the needs are. We mentioned on Sunday, the campus walk, which I'm really excited to participate in. And as you said, Dr. Adley, the fact that it's the first on-campus walk for a high school, I think really speaks to the community's commitment, the school's commitment around destigmatizing mental health. So I'm very happy that this has been a priority across the board. And then families, as Dr. Adley mentioned, I'm presenting next week with Julie Driller regarding the intersection of social emotional learning and student wellness within the context of mental health. I'm also going to reach out to some families who have experienced loss and just see if there's anything, any additional support or anything that can be learned. And then with the community, I'm participating in school climate specialist training, Uplift, which is a trauma-informed care training program. One of the things I think that's helpful is that some of the questions that I see coming up, and when we think about creating a cohesive mental health model, is that there's an opportunity to network with other districts or agencies who have done this before. So I have a few meetings set up with other individuals who are in a similar position in neighboring districts, Trumbull, Westport, New Canaan, just to ask questions about, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. If they've done universal screening measures, what are the pros and cons of each of those? So we can continue to look at it in the most informed way. Same with whether it's threat assessment or multi-tiered systems of support. And finally, there's a behavioral health resource coming up, and I'd like to gather that and aggregate it. Like I mentioned, I think creating a community for the psychologists and social workers, creating a bank of resources, opportunity for further professional development, anything that they may need to progress. All right. So 90 days, that takes us almost to the end of the school year. This is where I'm going to go back to kind of digging in a little deeper and engaging, not only hearing about what's happening, but actually observing some of the responsive classroom, the ruler teams, the DBT teams, identifying staff who may electively want additional training, whether that's in DBT, trauma-informed care, really assessing kind of what the training needs are. And given in my prior role, I did a lot of these trainings, being able to flexibly give them professional development and develop and deliver the administrators retreat and review school climate and mental health professional development surveys. So I see the end of the year as really an opportunity for some of the surveys that I've done to really look at what might be helpful for next year and put that, start to plan for that. And if I need to bring in outside people, do that as well. And given it's the end of the year, I think when you think about understanding school culture and climate, there are a lot of ceremonial, whether it's middle school graduation, high school graduation, just attending those and getting a sense of what it feels like, to just be present and part of that community. Again, I want to continue to facilitate consultation around behavioral and mental health needs. Ideally for next year, I'd like to provide ongoing workshops and or coffees. I say coffee because like the kids who like warm cookies, I think coffee can draw some people in too, but a series of workshops or coffees to begin in the fall for parents, whether the topic is around school avoidance or how to talk to my child so that they'll actually speak with me, how to regulate our own behaviors as parents, just kind of some topics that might be really applicable to engaging with your students and what we're doing. And updating the district website. I think there's already a tremendous amount on there. Thank you for doing that already. And I think it's an ever evolving list of whether it's providers or resources that I really want to kind of focus on keeping that updated. And then, like I said, this is also the community continuing to meet with, all of the agencies we met this morning with the mental health task force or Thriving Youth, continue to see what's available because there's so many opportunities to communicate with the community. So ongoing goals and outcomes. I'm not going to be done after 90 days. It will set the foundation for more to come. But when I really conceptualize where the need is, I think when we look at staff professional development and assessing both internal trainings, I think there is tremendously talented staff and learning from each other and sharing information. And that also creates a sense of community and culture, which we know even when we're thinking about resilience, whether it's for students or for anyone who's feeling burnout, that connectedness and continued learning actually helps reduce those feelings of burnout. And same, some of those may be external resources for professional development with a focus on recruitment and retention. I think, like I said, I know that it's really difficult these days to be in education. It's a wonderful profession and it's a lot. I think since COVID, we've seen a lot more individuals change professions. So how do we maintain the high caliber of staff that we have? Student well-being, I think there are a lot of wonderful supports that are available. I'd love to really look at it from a multi-tiered model in terms of what can we do for everybody at a universal level? How do we look at things like balancing academic rigor with self-care and well-being? How do we look at that kind of collectively at a higher level? How do we use language that values mental health and destigmatizes it all the way up to, you know, someone who needs a little bit more support or someone who really needs more intensive support, and we can create a connection or a link with outside agencies or organizations. Family school partnerships, like I said, I'd like to start with a series of workshops, things that are, you can leave and walk out and have something that you can try with your child to facilitate conversation or just to increase their mental health and well-being. And then there's been fantastic work already done with school community partnerships. I think the continuation and growth of those partnerships within the Darien community and beyond. I think there's great resources. I was recently presented at the National Association of School Psychologists, and many of the conversations that we are having here are happening across the country as well. And there's a lot of opportunity for, I remember someone describing their wellness center, and I think they were in Colorado, and I have their information, and just being able to look at this from a kind of not only within where we are, but beyond to create some partnerships and be innovative. With that, any questions, discussion?
Thank you very much, Dr. Dent. Appreciate that. Great, 30, 60, 90. So look forward to that. I will just throw it out to you. Swaha mentioned it. Are you involved in any high-level things going on at the high school as we approach exams, AP exams, internships? I think the wellness center, the cafeteria, the library, sometimes they extend their hours, or the cafeteria and the library does. The wellness center is new, but are we making sure we have what we need set up there to have these kids decompress and, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And I think I actually was at the wellness center at the end of the day. So I saw that it was even that last period, there was a presentation and there looked to be a good number of students in there. I'm also in contact with Ellen and the assistant principals if something comes up. I really think that it was really wise-minded to schedule this well-being week right before exams. And so I think it's looking at what's already there and continuing to build on it. But I think that right now I've offered them, pick up the phone, and if you guys need anything, I've been in and out. I was there earlier today, so I think, and I'll be there tomorrow. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
John.
So one of the things during budget season, we delayed was hiring a wellness director, as well as potentially implementing a wellness center or a model like that in the middle school. So I guess, again, you've only talking 30 days and not pressing you on that, but where does that kind of fit in your mosaic in terms of when you'd like to address that and bring forth recommendations to the administration, ultimately the board?
I think I've already, like I said, I think within the next 30 days, because I have spent a good amount of time in the wellness center. I actually, we had a similar program when I was in Westport, but I think this has the opportunity to be more robust in terms of creating student and staff community around mental health. I think there is an opportunity there to bring in other people, to have it staffed. I think it really could be a really great opportunity to expand kind of and model what it looks like to take care of one's mental health. So I think that at this point, I'm probably another 30 days, and then I can come back with a concrete recommendation. And so far, everything that I've seen has been really positive.
And same with the middle school also. I mean, that
For the
idea
kids
was
in
raised.
crisis, I think, you mean,
Oh,
kids in
did I say
crisis at the middle
kids-
school.
I'm sorry, kids in crisis.
Yes.
Is what we're-
Yep.
yeah.
Yep, kids in crisis, same thing. Like I said, the focus so far has been like elementary level SSO and the high school, but I talked to Carolyn, and I'm going over to the middle school next week. Next week I'll be gathering more information. So I think it's just a matter of time, but it's definitely, I've had positive conversations, and so far, like everything seems to be, I can't give a definitive answer because I haven't talked to us directly with the middle school staff, but I do think that when you look at those kind of universal supports, things like a wellness center, things like a teen talk counselor provides opportunity for it to be embedded into the culture of the school.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Jill.
You've been here a hot second, so I'm just curious, though. I know it's a lot of people to get out and know, but one of the things that we were looking at for your job was explicit connections with coaches who are sometimes embedded in obvious ways in our community and sometimes not. They just come in to help with a specific team. How easy have you found that access? And can you talk a little bit more specifically about how that fits in your future goals?
Yeah, I would love, that was actually one of the things that drew me here was I think it was explicitly stated around coaches. To date, and like I said, it's only 30 days in, but like that targeted group around lacrosse coaches, but it actually facilitated some conversation, just awareness around mental health and things to look for, but also how to like the balance of helping your kids move forward and also being a supportive adult in their environment. So I would love to have more ongoing conversation, not only with coaches, but I also think like there's other areas where students come to, right? Like they might be in the arts, and there's a culture and community within the arts, right? Whether it's performing arts or so I would love to meet at least with all of the chairs, and like for those the meeting we had with the lacrosse coaches ended up being towards the end of the day, because that's when, like you said, they're not all school employees. That's when they're available. So I'm happy to have those hours. So my goal would be to meet with the athletic director within the next 30 days, and also anyone else who chairs any of those clubs or organizations, because I think that there's unique needs across them.
Tara.
Sorry. Hi, thank you so much. Great presentation. My question also is about sports, but more focused on the kids. I love that you're speaking to different groups and such, but we're also going to be looking at sports in a different, athletics with the budget this summer. And I would also kind of like to hear what your input is in speaking to the students about, we know sports is a great place for them to go to, but, we also hear some feedback that sometimes there's different things going on that it's the opposite. And would love to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, I think especially like during COVID, we saw when kids weren't able to engage in group sports, like that's an area where they learn a lot of, developmentally appropriate adolescent socialization. So there's that balance. We saw that. And at the same time, recognizing that there are challenges that come with being in competitive sports. I am also the parent of a 16-year-old very competitive ice hockey player. So like, I see that too, in terms of it has both a really positive aspect. And I think just being authentic with kids and saying that you might really love something, and it might also come with some challenges and mixed emotions. And can we help you kind of navigate those? It might also be teaching them skills on how to effectively speak to your coaches or speak to your teammates. So I'm really passionate about the sports piece, and I know how important and what a big piece of it is in Darien. I'm looking forward to having that conversation with the kids.
I think all in all, we just hope that our sports environment is additive and not.
Yeah.
Julie.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. It sounds like you've really eased in the first 30 days.
I got the wrong shoes on.
I'm glad you
Like
have
I
plans to
said.
get started now. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Kind of in a different direction. I would love to hear, as you settle in, any thoughts you have on our spaces and how they contribute or don't contribute to the general wellness of our students. I think the Wellness Center is amazing, and it sounds like such a wonderful haven for people to go and take a break. But are there opportunities that we're missing in making the rest of our spaces a little more soothing, a little more calming? I'm going to go there, color palettes. Some of you have heard me talk about paint colors in some of our buildings, but we also have a lot of facilities projects going on, and it would be helpful to be as conscious of this as we go through these projects as we can be, so that our products on the other end are exactly as we'd want them, because I think that's a big contributor.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes, creating the space so that there can be self-awareness, self-reflection, certain areas, certain space. I think there's also opportunity to look at where is there space for natural student congregation and relationships to happen. We mentioned the cafeteria, and it's big, and it's like, you have to find your niche. So I can't speak to, I haven't had, like I said, it was, I don't know if I broke it down time-wise, the amount of time touring each building was minimal. However, I do think there's opportunity between now and even the end of the year to kind of walk around with that mindset of what is the aesthetic and how does it contribute to, learning and kind of emotional readiness to learn. So again, that's another, don't have an answer yet. And I would love to walk through with that mindset.
Julie, we've gone from rust to blue in the auditorium.
I know, which I think is progress.
Thanks to Kevin over the holiday break.
I had one other question.
Sure, go ahead, please.
When you were talking about I think it was a presentation you've done to staff about reducing burnout, it prompted this question. Can you just talk a little bit to the difference between preventing versus recognizing and addressing? Do we spend as much focus? Is there as much energy spent on helping people realize I'm in a place right now that isn't the best place for me, as we do helping them find the tools to try to prevent getting there?
I don't know that in that presentation, I kind of talked about the symptoms associated with burnout, like from a cognitive perspective, from a physical perspective. And I will say afterwards, a couple of people will be like, oh, that's what's going on, right? It's not this. So I think part of it is educating, like, what does burnout look like? And it's also, that also helps identify how do we address it. I think one of the big things that's happened is before COVID and after COVID, educators have had more responsibility, and they move a little further away from like what got them into the profession, because there's so many competing demands. And we talk often about finding your why. Why are you doing this? Why are you here? How do we create more opportunity for that to happen? So I think it's both. I think it's first that awareness, like what are the cognitive behavioral symptoms of burnout? And then once you know that, like, how do you address that?
As much as I love like the wellness center, and I love that we're being more open with mental health, I've noticed at my time at Darien High School, a lot of the more mental health related issues are social as well. Like there's a social stigma to taking a break or to talking about those issues. And I understand that that's kind of harder to get students to take that, because those type of pressures are from not even just families, from peers too, or between friends as well. So is there a way that you'd be addressing?
Yeah. I think that goes back to that universal level where we look at, and I actually taught a wellness seminar when I was at Staples High School in Westport, where normalizing teaching skills around self-care, or highlighting that, I think it's Yale, that their most attended class or most desired class is happiness, right? So normalizing that part of learning is also maintaining self-care, so that, even if you're going for a really competitive job, they don't want you to burn out quickly. They're having these challenges. So connecting it to like long-term goals, right? Like, so destigmatizing it by saying these are effective things for anyone to be able to do, even the most successful professional, right? These are not just while you're in high school. These are lifelong soft skills to kind of be effective. So I think that's an ongoing conversation. It's a conversation with looking at like curriculum and rigor and that balance of maintaining your self-care and mental health and progressing towards your goals. So I think it's a process. I think it's having those conversations, because I think that over time, when you start to talk about things, that becomes destigmatized. And I think we're at the beginning of it.
Sarah.
Thank you. To that point, thank you for your presentation. It was excellent. To the point about destigmatization, is that a word? I would like to touch a little bit about the family piece of this, because as all well and good, if everybody is hunky dory, happy in school, if you go home and your parents are not necessarily on board with talking about mental health or aren't sure how to talk about it with somebody else, how do you suggest, or how do you anticipate bringing parents along on the kids' journey of becoming more open with their mental health and understanding what's happening in self-care? And, is there a way that you could throw out like a quarterly how to do XYZ? I don't know, I'm just throwing ideas out here, but I think that the parent piece is a piece that's really, really important that I would love your opinion about.
Yeah, I agree. I often equate it to, and I think along with destigmatizing mental health is like demystifying what it is, right? Because mental health is really about effectively managing your emotions to be effective in whatever aspect of your life. If you put it that way, like I said, it doesn't matter what your profession is, whether you're a student, whether you're a parent. So I think even starting with those workshops about like consumable, digestible, here are some things that you can try, whether it's even just how to effectively validate your child's experience, even if you don't agree with their behaviors. I get where you're coming from, like not starting every dinner conversation with how was school? What did you do? How did you take care of yourself today? Right. And I'm guilty of that when we sit down and I'm like, oh, but it's just basic tips on how to change even just the language, right? Instead of you should have done this or you should have done that, tell me about how that went and what we can do differently. Right. So I think it's just like starting with parents that I often talk about it. We want to teach kids how to use this language. And it's like when you learn a foreign language, right? You master it by going home and using the same language and having those same conversations. So that parallel process of what we're explaining to the kids is also happening with parents, like you said, whether that's a parent workshop and then a follow-up as a newsletter, or just integrating it into the community, and the teachers use the same language too.
Katie.
I'll lean forward. You mentioned the gap between professional development and the daily ask of teachers, but I was curious if you had had an opportunity yet to assess the professional development needs of the school psychologists.
I had my first meeting with them on Friday, so that was really more like a meet and greet. But it was kind of like, where do you see need? I can't say it was formalized. I think that'll happen between now and the end of the year as we have more time together. I know they expressed a desire for more, professional development around different strategies, but I can't really speak to specifics yet about what they need. I think in general, it's just even like I had offered to create a resource bank, like go-to things for if you want to have a conversation with a parent around executive functioning or things like, and they were very appreciative, like it would be helpful to have some of those things readily available so that it's, I can go to a shared, I think it's also creating community to discuss challenges. I think that's really important. There's a lot of complex cases. Yeah.
I think to that point, I see you as a kind of a key ingredient as we go forward in the overall professional development side of the house in terms of how we look at it, what we do, how we roll it out. And I think that would be a good conversation amongst the cabinet with you.
Yeah, I'd love to have that. That's a lot of what I had done was professional development. And I think it's so helpful because teachers feel empowered, individuals feel empowered that they can and equipped.
Jill.
So again, thank you, recognizing that this is a 30, 60, 90, and you've been here for 30 days or 35. One of the other components of the job that we'd hoped you do was curricular in nature. So can you talk a little bit about sort of when that, again, understanding you have to prioritize, but when that would start to appear and what that would start to look like?
Yeah, I think so far it's been just kind of some brainstorming conversations, whether with Julie or Christopher, but finding each building where it makes the most sense and then being part of, I know I sat down with Julie and looked at some curriculum. We started to look at things like the elementary like progress report and how it reflects social emotional and things like that. So I think at least I'll have a better sense by the end of the year. And I think that when we look at that universal and the training, I think it's not only curriculum, it's also how we deliver the curriculum, what language we use, how we're infusing this in the lessons that are already there. Like, I don't necessarily know that it always has to be separate lessons. I think it's also the teacher kind of professional development and then becomes integrated into whatever the curriculum is. So that's, I think the professional development also gives them the capacity to look at it through a curriculum lens. And I do hope to have, like, between now and the end of the year, more conversations at each level around curriculum. It just hasn't happened yet.
I would only, Dennis, before I get to you, I would only add to that, that the board has, we've had a lot of conversations about curriculum and technology and connecting the dots of curriculum and technology. And we've invested heavily in technology, which got us through COVID. Last year, you know, we changed it up a little at the high school with bring your own device. And so I think a lot of that is still lessons learned and we're understanding how that goes. But I'd be interested to hear as you go down this path with the curriculum thing, we need to see more of how does the curriculum connect to the technology and what's the right amount of technology? At some point, the technology should be put down. A game of Uno should be played at a cafeteria table, or people should go outside and take a walk. And I think that needs to be part of professional development for the educators. It needs to be education for the students, that there's a time and a place for the technology and for using the technology, but there's got to be more of a time away from the technology.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my personal opinion. But
Yeah. I think that's a large conversation in education in general, right? Coming out of COVID, it's the balance of where do we honor where kids are in their learning and how do we evolve, like, in educationally, that balances both of those things.
Dennis, thanks for being so patient.
So Joe stole one of my questions. But my other question is kind of a more of a comment and a question, I guess, is, you know, I think we've gone through the different stages, or going through still the different stages following suicide. And I think there's many people on this board, as well as in the community, who are looking to solve problems and try to fix all of this and get it done quickly as possible, and realizing that it's not something that will ever be complete. But at least from one board member, I hope you feel that you can come to the board with anything, and I'm not going to give you a blank check, but you have full support of the board, I think, to do whatever we need to do. And you mentioned that, you know, we want to innovate and be a leader, but I think I want to be the leader in this field, and I hope we can do that. But I guess my question boils down to is, how often do you think you can come to us with ideas and things, or is that something you go to Dr. Adley, or how is that going to work with innovation, and how is that, I guess, how does it work?
Sure. My thought would be I would first go to Dr. Adley and say, here's what I'm thinking, and then see kind of where to go from there. Just because we're in frequent communication and already given me a lot of guidance, and then if needed, bring it to the board as a whole. But I think that, like I said, he's been great about checking in. How are things going? Do you need anything? If I see a need, I'll say right away, I'm not necessarily shy about asking for it, especially when it comes to student mental health. So I will do that.
Thanks, Dennis. You don't have to raise your hand.
One of the things, Dennis, thanks for that question. And I think one of the things we've come accustomed to a little bit, or at least familiar with, and is the understanding to bring things off budget cycle if we have to, if we feel it's a necessity. In fact, one of those things was the middle school. If and when we're ready, we'll bring that forward. I do just want to note and thank the board and the community in general for bringing Alicia and this resource to our students and families and staff members. It's valuable, and I just want to recognize that, because it's not particularly common. So thank you.
Great presentation. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks.
We'll move on to discussion and possible acceptance of contemplated gift from the Darien High School Parents Association. Hello, Principal
Good
Dunn.
evening.
How are
Good
you?
evening. I'm fine. Nice to see you all. And thank you to Alicia as well, if I may say so, for all of her support. The request before you tonight is to accept a gift from the DHSPA. I'm sure you remember earlier this year that Joseph Tang came to the board and with a well thought out set of comments about the need for additional bike racks on our campus. And we had, for very good reasons, around good health, physical health and well-being, as well as accessibility to the campus. So I had the pleasure of meeting with Joseph following that meeting, and it will not surprise you that he came well prepared with the presentations and photographs and many ideas about where those locations would be best suited to our student needs. And so we've had the opportunity to identify those locations. Kevin has worked with us on where those locations would be appropriate and that the bike rack would be safely installed. And we have 4 additional bike racks requested at the additional rack at the main entrance of the library, the main entrance of campus, under the bridge outside of the auditorium, and then outside the cafeteria. Those are the 4 areas that we think would meet the needs for additional racks at the school. And so the DHSPA has generously offered to support this project for $5,000. That would include the purchase of the racks and the installation, as it is their mission to support our students and especially projects coming forward from our students and that will serve our students today and also going forward. And so we thank our DHSPA for their close partnership and support of the school in so many ways, and thank them for their generosity here. So we put forward this request to all of you for your consideration.
Thank you, Principal Dunn. Appreciate that. And Joe Tang, if you're listening, thank you for your presentation and for doing all the follow-up on this. I actually had some feedback from some board members through the course of the day, and I'll open it up for conversation, but I think the board wants to take a direction of this becomes a cost associated with the board and the district. And while I appreciate the Darien High School Parents Association, the board appreciates it, all the fundraising they do and all the support that they do for our students. But I think this really, my view, will open it up to the board, but I've gotten a lot of feedback that this is something we just should do for the campus. It's physical infrastructure, and it's something that we can figure out at the board level with much appreciation to the Darien High School Parents Association, and they can figure out what to do with the $5,000 that they won't spend on the bike racks. So with that, I'll open it up. John?
Yeah, I provided some feedback, and I think when Joseph Tang presented, there were comments like, let's get it done.
Yes.
From fellow board members, I think yourself, Mr. Chairman. So I think we can find $5,000 in our surplus this year and get it done through board funds or, taxpayer funds versus the generous gift. So I'll be voting no, but with a very warm heart of thanks for the Darien High School Parents Association coming forth, and I'm sure they can find a better use for it.
Thank you, John. Thoughts, comments? Sarah?
I'll just echo what John said. I think that this $5,000, and we're going to talk about a pretty large surplus that we have. I think it's worth it for us to use our funds to make this happen. It is infrastructure in a way. And I think that the DHSPA works hard to fundraise, and they could find a better use of their funds to that would directly touch the students. So I'm fine with taking this off of our budget.
Ellen, have these been ordered?
Yes, I think it's in the works. We assumed that either we would be paying for it or the DHSPA would be covering it because we
Good.
wanted to get it
I'm glad
taken
it's,
care of. So
glad it's
we're
process.
in process already, yes.
Good, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Julie?
I just want to add one more thank you to Mr. Tang and to the DHSPA for the offer. And I'm glad to hear it's in the works because 'tis the season. I was at the high school today. There are a lot of bikes over there. It's beautiful biking to school weather. So I'd love to get
Has
those.
there been an
on
uptick in
campus.
electric bikes? I see more and more of them all over the place.
I
So
didn't
much
know
for the
these
health,
were
so
like-
much for the health offer on that one, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So fresh in.
So good.
Just a question.
Yes, Dennis.
So a little silly, but do we have or Ellen, I guess, do you have a policy in place with how long a bike can stay in bike rack? What if a bike sits there for a month or 2 months or how long is?
Yeah, you don't find that to be the case. They're coming and going on those bikes each day. So we haven't run into a problem that we've required a policy, but there's always, room for policies in high school, so we can develop.
That comes from someone that rides a bike through Manhattan and probably looks for bike parking spaces on a regular basis, Mr. Maroney, with his helmet, I might add. So, good. All right, good. So I will go through the motion. May I have a motion to accept the gift from the Darien High School Parents Association? There is no motion, so that will not move forward. But again, a big thank you from the board to the Darien High School Parents Association for that generous offer. But we will take that through our budget process. So Alan, if you could please extend our thanks to them and Joe Tang for continuing to follow up on this. And I would say, as I said, I think previously, let's get it done.
Thank
All
you.
right.
I did inform Joseph that we would be here talking about it, and he's thrilled and very grateful that he's been able to leave a legacy to Darien High School. So that's
Great.
wonderful. Thank you.
Rich, do you have a process or a potential motion when we move over to the finances?
So we can either amend the financial report tonight so you can approve a transfer so we can get going, or we'll have to bring a transfer to the May financial meeting.
I think we can amend it this evening. So, good. Jill? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to recognize, obviously, the parents for the support. Now, I'll certainly take responsibility. I apologize for putting them in the middle of it a wee bit because perhaps administratively should have executed quickly or quicker on it. So with that, I appreciate their kind offer.
No, good. Very good. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you, Alan. Have a good evening.
You too.
We will move on to discussion of draft Board of Education pre-budget topics and timeline. Dr. Adley and myself.
So the next three items on the agenda, one is the pre-budget topic, then we go into the financial report, and then we look at the proposed calendar discussion that ensued at the facilities committee and that the board wanted to look at. So I'll just talk big picture real quickly, what you have before you. And this was also discussed at the finance committee, and we decided recommendations separate this out because it really isn't the budget calendar per se. So this tries to capture what we thought the board has discussed over a number of meetings, everything, Mr. Chairman, from technology integration to everything in between. You can see the list there. So what we've tried to do is between the memorandum and the draft Board of Education pre-budget topics and timeline, for the want of a better term, so we don't confuse it with the budget calendar, is to see that we can name these things, but if we don't place them somewhere, they're not going to get done. And it's going to be a heavy lift type thing. So one, we want to make sure that have we captured everything. Two, the board meetings around the calendar that we have sort of outlined here and presented, is it reasonable? We did separate out a couple of items. I'll just talk extemporaneously a little bit about a couple of these things. Some items we put in FY25 and some items we put in FY26. I just didn't think we could get everything done. So we separated some of them out in that capacity there. And you can see that we tried to incorporate some of the other tasks like draft board goals and so on and so forth. The memorandum itself sort of just touches bases on the topics. I will say, just so we update athletics, Christopher, Ellen, myself, Richard have a conference call with CIC, their executive director, who I know well, and he is willing to do an assessment for us at no charge. That will assess across CIC and but also with a FCIC lens. So I don't know why we wouldn't actually take them up on that. Minimally, it will be a good piece of data before the end of the school year. And so we've listed some things there. We've basically put them down into a calendar. It's for board discussion and thoughts on that, but I don't know if you have any other comment on it. I think it's sort of speaks for itself. I will say that on the fourth page of that memorandum, the board book distribution probably doesn't belong in this memorandum. It belongs sort of in a separate memorandum of the calendar, but that's okay. Get the gist of it.
Oh, okay. Yep. So thank you, Dr. Adley and the cabinet and all for organizing this. I think it's well organized. I think the one thing I would ask the board to think about with respect to kind of these initiatives and these works, and thank you for the conversation with SEAC and FCAC, is, this is on top of what I think is a very busy normal calendar. This is on top of day jobs, with the focus needs to be educating our students and the safety and well-being of our students. So I think there also might be a need to do some prioritization in here as to what we really want to focus on. I mean, you look at projects on an annual basis, whether it's your home or in your business, and there has to be some prioritization around time, energy, and also dollars as to what really can get done and done well. And I do worry about taking on too much because whatever we take on, we need to do really well and complete and have it benefit, again, the students at the end of the day.
Mr. Chairman, they follow, just for clarity. Each of the topics, basically, it gives you a board date to come to the full board.
Yes.
And then the subcommittee work goes to basically the month prior. That's
right.
basically what
But again, it's a lot of work, and it's more work on the subcommittees. It's more work on the cabinet too. So I just think that's something we have to think about as we go through this. The other thing I will just say in the broader scope, and I know I've gotten some feedback from some board members too. I like the concept of SEAC or FCAC coming in here and doing a review, but I think one of the things that's on board members' minds is it's bigger than athletics. It's theater, it's the arts, it's clubs, it's councils. So I think athletics is a component of, I don't know if the right term is extracurricular, but I think that's what we want to look at in whole as a whole in terms of what opportunities our students have, the costs associated with that. I'm not going to get into the weeds on that. We could go on and on forever in terms of uniforms and all that good type of stuff. So I'll pause there and open it up for further board conversation. Katie.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that there is a lot of depth of work to be done laid out here. From my perspective, I would like to prioritize a discussion on the literacy program much sooner than fiscal year 26.
Thank you, Katie. Sarah.
So I agree with you that athletic conversation is, I think that the SEAC, FCAC, whatever that is, it sounds great, but it is a broader conversation. And I think that has policy implications, that has budgetary implications, it has a lot, it's a big nut. So to me, that is, of all the things listed here, I would think that I would prioritize that discussion as it is a broader, multi-layered discussion. My other comment is that are we putting too much on the subcommittees? I worry that we are doing too much work in small groups and then not having the full conversation at the board table where everybody gets to weigh in. And I know that, yes, we have the conversation in subcommittee, we then bring it back, but the level of conversation is not as robust as I personally think it should be for some of these larger ticket discussion items. So, I'm thinking about like the department chairs, like as chair of the subcommittee, I don't know that I want to have that department chair conversation, which is a big conversation with just 4 people, and then shift it back to the board and say, here's our recommendation, take it or leave it, which is basically the way it happens. So I think some of these conversations are applicable to subcommittees, but I think some of them are broader conversations. So.
All right, go ahead.
Go ahead, John.
I've been on a board that tried to attack everything at the board level, and it was a disaster.
Yeah, I'm not saying
Okay.
everything. I'm just saying there's some of these that
So-
I think need to
so-
come out of subcommittee.
So I think, winding my exuberance back on the subject. Yeah, you make a point, but I find working within the subcommittees, you ask all the important questions. Everything is now published easily within a day on TV 79 or YouTube channel. So it's part of you as a board member to being coming to watch those committee meetings.
100%.
I don't have comments a lot of times because you ask my questions. It's like back in the budget process. So, to sit around and regurgitate what the committees do, and they do awesome work. I think what we accomplished here as a group, as this board has been built at this point, is great, and it's a productivity enhancer. So I would, again, if there's a meaty subject, we're going to talk about it at the board table. So that's my personal opinion.
Dave.
Thank you, Duke. I would just, a couple points. One, back up Katie. I think literacy is something we should prioritize sooner than later. I think you're right in sort of the prioritization we have to look at. A lot of these things, we're getting into the weeds, we're getting into details. I mean, we've had hour-long conversations about the uniform replacement cycle as a full board before. That's a waste of everybody's time. I really think the proper question for the board should be, what are our broad policies to extracurriculars, whatever form those take? We should set those policies broadly, what our goals and objectives are. And then the director of athletics can figure out how to do uniforms. Like, that's a waste. So I totally agree with and back up what you were saying, Duke, prioritization. But I think we can achieve a lot of that if we really focus on the high level goals and policies, which is our purview.
Thanks, Dave. Julie.
Not sure what I was going to say now.
All right, next.
No, I'll still talk. On the committee process, I'm probably less concerned about whether we decide to continue doing as much work in committee as I am about just being as aware as we should be, that that's how we are doing things. And you've heard me say this, Duke, I know, but I feel like we sort of migrated to this place where we're doing much more of the heavy lifting in committee. And I don't remember having a conversation like we're going to shift to that. It could have happened. I'm not saying it didn't, or it might have happened before I was sitting here, but it has happened. And I think it changes the work or the way that we as board members need to be doing the work. It's not like, oh, we're having a pre-read in a committee meeting and then we go and have the discussion at the table. There's a lot of work going on at the committee meeting. And it's also important for our audience, who we don't want to lose. And we want to keep engaging, but we want to make sure that people are paying attention to these committee meetings and hearing the questions that are being asked and understanding that the diligence is being done at the level that it should be done. I still worry a tiny bit because we are 9 people bringing perspectives and points of view. And I know we get some of that when the committee brings something to the table. I'm not sure it gets quite to the same degree. But again, if it's incumbent on all of us to stay up to speed on all the committee meetings, which is a lot of work, but I think we can do that. I just think we have to be really conscious of working that way. Maybe everybody else knew that. It might just be me who's coming to that realization. All of that said, I still think there are some things on this list that are bigger than committee that maybe need a pre-discussion as a larger group before it goes into committee. And as a further point on that, I think there's some things here that I just wouldn't have assigned them to the committees that they're being assigned to on this list. And so maybe I'm looking at it differently, which suggests to me that there is a conversation to be had there to figure that part out.
Katie. Thanks, Julie.
I agree. I'm quite wary of pushing too much and too heavy of topics to subcommittees for the reasons that were outlined. When you look at this table, this can largely be divided, I would say, in half to the curriculum committee, and then most of the rest goes to the finance committee. For what it's worth, my personal opinion that the finance and the policy subcommittees in particular make a lot of sense for those minutiae and those details. But when I look at this list for curriculum committee, these topics are essentially the responsibility of the Board of Education. That is why we are sitting here. And I would, as I'm not on that committee, and I would be uncomfortable not being part of the early conversations for those.
Thanks, Katie. Jill?
So our policy actually specifies sort of how we're organized. And one of the things it talks about is the use of subcommittees. As subcommittees, we are required to come to the board with a recommendation. I think that intentionally we're set up actually to work in that structure. There are multiple examples of where it's been very effective. For example, facilities. There are two different ways to use subcommittees. And I think we need to open that discussion up a little bit. There are times when we just take information like a financial report. We take a look at it. There might be a few questions, but by and large, it comes very much to the board in the same format that existed before. There are other times where we might take a more abstract topic, like how do you deal with a budget calendar? And the subcommittee kicked that around a little bit and said, we want to take a look at the budget process. What do we have to do next? After a discussion, it became clear the next logical discussion was to look at a calendar and then take it from there. And so while we're having a discussion about subcommittees, we actually later in the meeting have a pretty structured way to deal with how we want to talk about the budget process. The third way that we deal with, have used subcommittees, is something comes to us and we take a look at it and we say it's not sufficient. It actually needs to be kicked around some more. And facilities is a really good example of where we've had to send things back before they came back to the board. We have a couple of examples of that. HHR, in the way that it's structured, came up through the facilities committee. Similarly, we have our libraries for the moment are not back at the board table because we don't need to have a full discussion about libraries right now. The district is not in a position to take on doing libraries at Tokenie, Middlesex, and the high school. And we've also pointed out that there may be bigger discussions at Middlesex and or the high school. So I think we can probably at a later date, we probably ultimately need to put a subcommittees on the agenda because we're a little bit off agenda at the moment and just talk about the use of it. That said, I think each of these, part of what's difficult is they would probably be, the subcommittees may be used in different ways to talk about these topics. So for example, curriculum committee may need to kick around. What are the questions we want to ask about department chairs before we actually have a robust discussion about them? Finance, maybe need to talk about the universe of participation fees. Athletics probably needs to go somewhere to kick around. If we sit here, 9 of us, and say, what do we want to talk about for athletics? We will be here for the entire duration of the retreat, and we have done that before. So somebody's going to have to take ownership, a smaller group, for figuring out what is the key question, what are we trying to ask? Even the small list of 4 bullet items is a pretty big list. So I think that my personal opinion is we do need to do some prioritization, and some of that might be maybe curriculum talks about literacy and says what would be the scope of looking at literacy and comes back to the board and says this is the impact of it. But I would suggest that we move forward with this by and large the way that it is. Let the subcommittees do their work, bring it back to the board and see where it fits.
John.
And remember, the board charges the subcommittees with the role. And the subcommittees come back to the board. So like nothing's actually completed. So we added 2 subcommittees just recently as a board to look at things differently in more detail. So are we, again, we're way off topic agenda, like point of order. Maybe we should put an agenda item on, but we talked about taking them away already. It makes no sense to me.
That's not what I'm suggesting. Sorry. That's not what I'm suggesting. And I think to your point, the use of this, how the subcommittees are used are very different than somehow maybe what I interpreted here. Like to have, just to use department chairs as the example, here's a curriculum committee, figure out what we need to talk about. Here, administration, please go back and figure that out. And then let's have the discussion at the full board table. I don't want it to be, my concern is that I don't want the subcommittees to be doing the work for the 9 of us, saying, here's the recommendation, and the 9 of us become a rubber stamp. That is not what I want to happen. I want all 9 opinions heard on every.
It was never
I
the intent.
have heard that concern from people, so I just want to make sure that that's not what happens.
I will tell you.
People on the board or off?
No. Doesn't like, there's just a general perception that is, we don't talk in depth at the full table. So.
I will
They
tell
should
you.
watch our committee.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a big component of that, you got to pay attention.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to pay attention, the community has to
And
pay
that we
attention,
have to pay attention.
I will tell you, approaching almost 9 years on this board, that having committees, not having committees, I think we're at the best place we've ever been with having these subcommittees. And I think the best work has been done by these subcommittees. And I think it's streamlined the meetings. I can remember having some of these topics at the board table and these meetings going 4.5, 5.5 hours, because 9 people discussing some of these topics is a lot. With that said, I think all the points around this table are valid, and I think I'll just use it as an example. Something like a literacy conversation, I think that's a board conversation, and we decide as a board that here are the questions, or here's what we want looked at or reviewed by the curriculum committee. And then it's up to us to give the feedback to the curriculum committee also. But it's up to us to make that decision. Are we comfortable with that topic coming up through the curriculum committee, or is there another way we want to do it? But I think we have to think about how we manage this, how we manage the work at the administrative level, how we manage the work at our level too. If you go, you sit at a board meeting at a company, you know, I've been at incredibly efficient board meetings where they're 2 hours. The audit committee presents, the HR committee presents, the compensation committee presents, what the technology committee presents, right? Everyone on that board, their role is to do their homework and look at the presentations and understand the information that's coming before them. But those subcommittees do the work and bring the information to the board. There's no point in 12 people on a corporate board having those in-depth conversations. You have the expertise of those people at those subcommittees. And I think we've done a really good job of that. But I think, you know, look, we can continue to talk about it and make sure everyone feels comfortable to where they're doing. But I think to your point, Julie, I think this has moved in that direction. We've had a lot of conversations on it since I was on the board, but the key is that everyone realizes you can't come to this table and have not listened to a curriculum committee meeting or looked at the information, you know, and so you can participate, you know, 100% at the table. So. Dennis.
So just one last point with that. I agree with everything you said. I mean, I think that's, you know, we've sat here too long at 11:30 trying to make a massive decision, and you're exhausted and you're starving. But I think the other part as well, though, is the subcommittees are structured to be a minority part of the board. So you can't come and say, this is our expectation, because you can still be voted down by the 5 members who aren't part of that subcommittee. So I think that's a key part that we're not discussing.
Yeah. Good.
What's the next steps? What do you want to
So
do?
so I would, in terms of next steps, the one thing I think we should all think about from a prioritization standpoint, what we want to put on an agenda for the summer retreat. I think there's some work there that we need to think about that we want to accomplish. And then I would just have everyone go through and make sure these are everything we want to, excuse me, look at. But then I think we need to put some prioritization in place, even as we build it out into the calendar.
So next meeting, potentially come with some
Yeah.
prioritization ideas.
Yeah, and I'd like to start to build out a draft of what we want to tackle. I mean, we've done a good job the last couple of times at the summer retreat, is actually making some decisions and tackling some topics, putting some stuff to rest that had been kind of dangling out there for a while. I do think that we as a board need to come to some decision, and I appreciate Dr. Adley, what you brought to the table with the SEAC and the FCAC, but that is a component of it. So we have to decide, number one, if we want to tackle the big picture, all right? And then I've said it before, I think that's beyond the administration and beyond this board in terms of tackling that, whether it's a consultant or an advisor or facilitator or something like that. But if we want a holistic look at that, Dennis and I have been through this 3 times or 3.5 or 4 times on the athletic conversation. Personally, I don't want to go through it again unless we do it and we do it right. And we do it from a consultative standpoint. And if we need dollars and resources to do it, but then we have to decide what's the outcome we're looking for and what are the actionable items that we're looking to accomplish. And I think we have bits and pieces of them in here, but I'll pause there.
I just want
Yes.
to know what it is, you know, and that's the thing that I've
Yes.
struggled since being on the board for 4 years. No one knows what it is. So.
Yeah. And I think, Jill, you said this well. We talk about equity, we talk about equality. They're 2 very different things. Equality, I think, is kids having the opportunity to participate. Equity, thank you, to participate in all these sports and theater and music and stuff like that. And then the dollars and cents are kind of a separate topic too. So go ahead.
The one thing I note on here is we have clubs and councils, unified sports coming to finance. I'm not sure that could go to finance in terms of what is the financial, but I think there's a non-financial component.
Yep. Okay.
Unified Sports is a SEAC, right? It's not a club. It's,
I don't think it's under, is it under SEAC?
it's under SEAC.
It is.
Yeah, so that's probably not in the right.
I thought it was
place.
under Shirley. Unified Sports.
I think we lumped it there just for convenience, but you're right, it's
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking to SEAC and we're looking at athletic, having a conversation with them about that, we should include unified
Yeah.
sports.
So what I will, Alan will build an agenda item on this, but I would ask the board to prioritize what they want to look at from a retreat standpoint. And it could be a discussion around how we're going to look at this and how we're potentially going to organize around it and what are the questions we want to answer around that. And then I would just go through and do some prioritization to Katie's point of where she sees literacy. And there may be reasons from an administrative standpoint why literacy is, out further than, where you feel it should be, but that's what we need to hear from the administration. All right.
Yes, it would be helpful as we go around that the next time that if there's different dispositions from board members, there needs to be a consensus, like from the full board generally, that's to move
Yeah.
something or not.
I think like if you look at this first page, you've got athletics, clubs, councils, unified sports. Some of that almost falls into one topic to me that I think we're going to look at it holistically. All right, good. We will go on to discussion on March 2022. What do you mean? Right. I think part of this timeline, I think would be part of everyone going and looking through this again. So we can say we reviewed it and discussed it this evening, but let's look for potential action items, some of this in terms of dates and specific board topics for the agenda. Discussion on March 2022, 2023 financial report, possible action on proposed budget transfer. So Rich, is this where we would do an amendment?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll have you go through your
Yep,
report.
and I'll amend it at the end.
Thank you.
So this is the financial report through March. We were forecasting a positive balance of $864,678. We would recommend then obviously taking $5,000 off of that, so it would be $859,678. The general education RCs are about positive 161, and the special education RC is positive 703, which is primarily excess cost related. The salary forecast is a positive $60,000. It is primarily associated with available balance within student interns that weren't filled. The recommendation for that second transfer will take $5,000 out of that student intern account to potentially fund the bike racks. Moving to operating, it is a positive $5,465. We do have a positive $2,500 for the adult ed cooperative with Stanford, and then a small savings in the annual audit of $1,300. Moving to fixed, we are forecasting a positive $110,000. The bulk of that is in health insurance, relates to unused health insurance packages due to lower enrollment at the elementary schools. Equipment is forecasted at a negative $1,080. That is for the English horn. That's for a transfer today. That would be extinguished if the transfer is approved. And then revenue is a positive $689,000. The bulk of that does relate to excess cost. We were informed by the state that they are increasing our reimbursement from 70% to 73.7%, which is why you see about another $140,000 of additional revenue in this report compared to the February report. And then just other noted revenue items, ELP tuition is down about $30,000, building rentals as well. Parking fees are slightly up, gate receipts are slightly up, and then Medicaid revenue is slightly up. So while this shows one transfer, we'll have two transfers for the board to consider. The first is to fund the board's portion of the donation for the English horn for $1,080. We are recommending taking that money from the savings associated with the annual audit. And then the second transfer would be for $5,000 into improvement of sites, which is an RC12 for facilities. That would be for the bike racks and the funding coming from student interns. And we would recommend that coming from him.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Board questions? Good. Katie?
At the finance subcommittee meeting, Rich and I had had a conversation about the ECR and some questions regarding the tracking of services and the audit with the state. And Shirley, he had mentioned that some of the answers to those would come from you. So I was just curious if you'd had a chance to see that meeting and if you could weigh in on some of those outstanding questions.
I did not see the meeting, so I don't know the questions to answer. But I can say our tracking systems have been consistent with excess cost. We've been using our in-house Google tracking system with Heather Shea. All of our providers in a timely manner submit their data. It's focused. We've been consistent every year with our audits that we've come out, I'd say stellar, with our tracking systems, and they're responsible for submitting it on a weekly basis.
So we have, thanks, Katie. So we have Heather, who's been here as long as I've been here. So she is our in-house specialist and does this 24/7 for us.
Yes.
And then it's audited by an external auditor.
Correct. So at the end of the year, we are required, not just excess cost, but everything to be audited.
Right.
So the Board of Finance appoints an auditor. So it was Bloom Shapiro. I think they merged into CLM. And so what they do is they do an audit of the excess cost submission, and then actually look at the files that were submitted for a number of students. And so because we submit on March 1st, we're submitting, not 8 months of actuals and then a forecast of 4 months. So they're looking, did anything change from what you forecasted for those 4 months to the end of the year? It could be anything from a student maybe didn't attend all the days. It could be a student change placement or services change, whatever it might be. And so that adjustment could be positive or it could be negative. And because it could be negative or positive, the state does tie that to ECS money in the following year, which goes directly to the town.
Right.
And so usually what you see is typically like a small adjustment. It usually ranges, $20,000 to $40,000 of an adjustment, either positive or negative. And that's based on what happens during that audit period, which happens in the summer.
And then does the state do an audit on what we submit to them? And then that audit ties into what you just described in terms of a potential positive or negative from an ECS standpoint.
So the state doesn't do an audit. They do look at your claims. They do, they'll ask questions about whether or not something's a state approved facility or, certain questions about services that might be, but they're not auditing the actual figures. That only comes from the independent auditors that the town has.
Okay, good. What else?
Yeah, a couple follow-ups. So Shirley, can you just confirm then when you said that the ECR tracking has always been happening? So we certainly came to light this year that tracking was something that we needed to implement across special education. So if I'm understanding you right, you're saying that you did always track services that were fulfilled for students that you were expecting to be part of ECR. You just weren't for the other ones. Is that correct?
Well, no, providers were tracking with their own systems. And I mentioned that when we started to roll out our new tracking system. So it may be they used paper and pen for doing attendance. They might have used their own Google Docs. They might have used their own electronic system. Some providers actually use roll books. So what we had presented in our first memo to you back in March, I think it was March 3rd, we rolled out and said we were going to use a version of our ECR tracking form because there were different fields we wanted to capture. We want to capture actually a checkbox that says if it was received or not, and a comment section for the providers to say why it was missed and how they're going to make it up. So in our memo on March 3rd, we had rolled that out. We started by first meeting with the entire administrative team. We rolled it out. Then we went school by school to roll it out to the administrators and the SCSS teams. Chris and I did the elementary schools. We went to each school, rolled out the attendance form, said what the expectation was for that form. And if you recall, in our memorandum, we said that we would have beginning in April, and we did roll it out when we returned on April 17th. In the elementary schools, every 6 days, because they have a 6-day cycle, the administrator would watch over it and see what's being missed or what makeup session is. In Middlesex, 5 days, since they have a 5-day cycle, and in the high school on an 8-day cycle. It also can be done in Excel, so everyone has the same form, but they can store it the way they want to, and it's student specific. So to your question, Katie, we used our excess tracking form as a model. We modified it somewhat to really meet the needs because the state has other questions that were asked on their excess cost. And we rolled it out on the Monday, the 17th.
Yeah, so I understand all of that. I think the distinction there was that while a lot of providers were tracking, that administration had no roll up of that. So if someone had pencil and paper, they had something tucked in their pocket, that wasn't something that you could see. So that was the distinction that we needed to put in place.
And actually in response to that, which is why we developed a new form to make sure, because we were in agreement that we didn't want individual record keeping of that. And the concern of the board was we needed a systematic way that everyone would use the same form. I think we did mention that we might look to our tracking for secondary for next year, if we could probably use our Aspen system, if that were possible. But in response to your question, Katie, it was in moving forward to really make sure that we are identifying missed sessions. We are informing administrators and they're responsible on the level and working with families to make up any missed sessions, or in moving forward to find ways to increase our ability not to miss those sessions. What can we do when we know there's a full day of PPTs, if we can find ways to cover that so we're not missing them moving forward. We've also asked people, and the staff has been wonderful. Again, I said we're not asking people to, but we are asking people if they are willing to give up their lunch and their preps to do some makeup sessions. We greatly appreciate that. There is a payroll associated with that, and we've been able to use that also. And the final one, Katie, was, if you noticed, I think we asked for 0.8 in SLPs and a 0.4 in OTs, that we're using contract services to make up many missed services that have already occurred.
So a lot of what you said brings up a lot more questions, but sticking to tonight's agenda item, and perhaps I can follow up with the chairman about addressing some of those other things later. Just to this point though, everything that was submitted then you had tracked, so you did not submit anything in the actuals that included missed services, or were you submitting based on the expectation of making up?
We asked all of our providers to track all their missed services up to this date and to come up and work with their administrators of how they can, working with families, make up missed sessions. We're not asking them to transfer onto the new form, though. The new form was effective April 17th.
I'll just restate my question again. So in the actuals that you submitted to the state that determined what our ECR is, that the numbers that Rich has, did those include missed services that you were expecting to make up, or did you only submit services that were actually already fulfilled?
ECR only submits services that are provided.
Okay, thank you.
There is no missed on that, yes.
I just think it's important to make the distinction that the actuals are for the students that are ECR reimbursable students, like how many students, it's not the student that gets 2 speech lessons per 6-day cycle. Like it's a very specific group of students for that gets reimbursed. For
ECR reimburses for sessions that are provided.
Yeah. Katie, you can give me a call or whatever offline or something, but Heather Shea lives this. I mean, she was a board member. Rich, how long has Heather Shea been doing this? I mean,
I've been here 4 years and she was here before me, so.
Yeah,
We started, I think this is our 8th year. It might have been part of year 7.
But in my time on the board, we've gotten compliments from the state on our submissions, and they're done by an outside auditor. So, but we can follow up.
We also are able to track, just I don't know if Katie's aware of that, and in Heather's formatting, we track everything.
Right.
We track PPT meetings, we track all the services, we track content providers. Everything is captured in terms of costs for students who are receiving reimbursement for excess costs. That's our responsibility.
Yes, good. Jill?
No, that's okay.
Good. All right. So we will move forward. May I have a motion to approve the budget, the proposed budget March transfers as outlined by Rich Riddle? Dennis, second. John, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. So we'll move on quickly to discussion of draft budget process.
Mr. Chairman, you have a draft budget calendar that was reviewed by the Finance Committee. First step, administration brought this forward in terms of looking at the process we currently have, bringing it forward a little bit in some cases, adding a few steps along the way for efficiency purposes or otherwise. And we're happy to relatively talk through the main components of this. If you want us just to go through it, we could do that.
All right, John, you want to?
Yeah, I was just gonna, for those that might not have watched the committee meeting, the primary goals of this to reorganize the meeting calendar. So what we discussed earlier, the goals and objectives, the new initiatives are discussed earlier in the process. So we don't do that in the budget meeting. The Q&A, try to find better ways to manage and streamline that, and also have questions addressed to the board, not directly to the administration. And at that time, the board will find a way to ensure that they're budget-related questions. We totally want the interactive dialogue. I think I said it 3 or 4 times that this year's input from the community as well as our government partners is crucial to where we came out in the budget process. So we're not trying to stifle that, but we're trying to properly order that, give the board time to review the superintendent's budget and then the 5-year budget process. So, the calendar that you got, I'll just highlight a couple dates and things that we modified or highlighted during the committee meeting. The tour of the schools was earlier. I think that was a consensus by everybody. Let's see that earlier. So we're seeing what we're approving. There was some discussion of when we would publish the superintendent's proposed budget that's set for December 21st. It becomes a public document as confirmed when it's released to us. So we had some discussion whether or not it was appropriate to just post it on the website at that point. I think we weighed in favor of that if I read the consensus. So everybody gets it on December 21st in online version, and you can see who gets it in hard version. So we have a lead on the hard version as a board, but everybody can read it over their Christmas break if they wish. The other thing was saving trees. We're just gonna, Rich and Alan, we're gonna create an opt-in process for anybody off that doesn't sit on the Board of Education or cabinet, and some select others, but this way. And then Katie's idea was also to, when you post it, to have chapters posted, so you can, if you wish, just go directly to that chapter, or RC, I should say, not chapter, and then print it. And they do the town plan and conservation development like that, so that should be easy. There was January 12, 2024. It was, we want kind of a submission date for all questions that haven't been asked verbally, just so we have some time to go through them as a board and ensure that they're all budget related questions. And then culminate kind of all the Q&A from our government partners on January 18th with a special board meeting. And the way I kind of envision it is, while the budget's in our hands, people come to us in our meetings. And then when it goes to the Board of Finance, if they need administration and or the chair, anybody else, they can go to the Board of Finance meeting, same thing with the RTM, but just kind of better organized structure, who goes where at what time. I think no, nothing else really changed there. And, the public hearing is kind of the same place, and the ad cut night, the proposal is in this roughly the same place, as well as the final ad cut night. And then the March 19, 2024, I think there was a special Board of Education meeting added, and that would be, if needed, another kind of joint meeting to discuss whether or not there were any outstanding questions.
Yes.
So I think those were kind of the key highlights. If I missed any, my committee members can tell me. But
Thank you, John. Thanks for all the work. And I think this is a good kind of straw man. I think the goal here was, how can we make this process a little more efficient? It takes an inordinate amount of time from the administration and the principals to put this budget together, again, over and above the day job of educating our students. I think, to me, the key has always been, number one, the distribution of the budget book, or the superintendent's budget book, and everyone's interested in getting that. And then always the Super Saturday component of it. So, and I think, we talk about communication, and to me, as I've thought through this and had some conversations with folks, I think the key to everyone understanding is that Super Saturday, that's the superintendent's proposed budget to the Board of Ed. And it's really our working day to hear from the administration about their budget, the numbers. There's been a lead up to this in terms of proposals or additions to staff and all those conversations we want to happen in the fall. So that we talk about the impacts to the budget by some of that stuff we're looking at supporting or that the administration is bringing forward. So again, it's not to sideline anyone from providing feedback, but I think the key is that our partners in RTM Education, RTM F&B, and Board of Finance, in a way, I'll say it's like, let us do the work around the proposed budget from the superintendent. All right, because I think then that educates the questions that our partners in RTM Education and RTM F&B and the Board of Finance may ask or not ask, depending on how they see the work proceed until it moves to a Board of Ed budget. So I think that to me is a real, something I think we have to continue to think about. And I think it cuts down on, the amount of questions. And those questions take a lot of time. I think the process and our commitment is really to RTM Education, RTM F&B, through the process and Board of Finance, and then ultimately to the RTM. So, and again, I think in my time, I think the process has gotten better. The partnership with Jack and Ed, and I spoke to them this week. They're all about how do we streamline this? How do we save time that people are spending at additional meetings at the night, whether it's leadership from the board or leadership from the administration. So I'll pause there. Katie.
Sorry, Katie. I think this is going to be refined when we put the final budget calendar.
Yes.
This was again done now while everything was fresh in our mind, but as we approach the next budget calendar.
Yeah.
In the next chair and how they handle each meeting and schedule it with that administration or the chair at the time.
Yeah, well, I think too, and I worked with Ed and Jack on that, and even Jim Palin, and I think it's got to be emphasized on a go forward basis. I've gone back and looked at those questions, and a huge percentage of those questions have nothing to do with the budget. So it's not a time to catch up on everything that's gone on over the course of the last year or ask your individual or personalized questions. It's a time to focus on the initiatives that have been brought forward, how they impact the budget and what the budget looks like. Again, it goes back to paying attention throughout the course of the year. Joe.
Related to what you're saying, I think the other reason that we brought it forward at this time is because the previous agenda item where we looked at that calendar, we're trying to move a lot of our policy and program work earlier in the year. So that means that a lot of the questions that we received during the budgetary season actually will be much more appropriate starting June 27th when we look at our goals and objectives, maybe before that, but certainly when we look at our goals and objectives and then talk about new initiatives through the year. So we wanted all of our partners to understand that because we're shifting the work earlier, that programmatic policy work earlier, that those types of questions would be better served earlier in the year alongside that work, and that they may need to attend differently. So just to your point of wanting to make sure that feedback exists, but that the work of the budget season should be much more budgetary and financial in nature in terms of how those things fit in. I think, Katie, I might have jumped in front of you.
Katie.
Just a small point, and John, I know you and I had talked about this before too, but under February 27th, it lists the BOE approved printed budget books for the board and for the cabinet. And I think John and I, at a minimum, felt very similarly that we certainly didn't need them printed. So maybe that can be an opt-in as well.
Yeah, good point. Let's go green. Julie.
I was curious if our partners, committees and board partners had any requests or suggestions from their standpoint that would make it easier for them to work with us this way better.
So I sent 3 emails. We did, I know our chair talked to Jack and Ed. I spoke to Jack and Ed. Jack was at our meeting, but I did not receive any emails from anybody or comments from anybody. Oh, and Jim threw an email that you guys also.
Yeah. Yep. So I think they'll continue as we go through the process and fine tune it. I know there's upcoming RTM Ed and RTM F&B meetings coming forward, and I've always offered for us to participate in those meetings. So, but I think they're allowing us, it is on the agenda for RTM education, and I spoke to Ed about that. I thought it was somewhat premature as we're still thinking through this process, but I think, you know, in my conversation with him, he felt it was a good point in time to hear from his committee any of their thoughts as we've gone through this process. And so we'll continue to do it that way. Katie.
And just in case anyone else didn't watch the finance committee meeting, it is worth noting at this table as well that it was reinforced that the board appreciates public comment and that will still be a component as well, that the community constituents beyond just the elected ones will have an opportunity to weigh in.
I did get a text last week from someone attending the high school PTO meeting, and they texted me, they said the conversation is that we're eliminating public comment during the budget process. So I love how stuff is taken out of context and thrown around social media and brought up. So, but I, you know, responded quickly and said that is not the case. So thank you, Katie, for reinforcing that. Sarah.
Thank you. Food for thought, not for tonight, but we all need to kind of chew on. So we're receiving these questions, not the administration. Who filters? How do we filter? What does that process look like? I think we need to think about what that looks like.
Yeah. Well,
My
unless
thought-
it's pertaining to the budget, it gets eliminated.
Yeah, my thought process.
Right, but whose job is
I don't think so, Dennis.
Is that, just given the time factor, hearing what the board wants us to process and not want us to process, it would be much more efficient for the cabinet just to filter them ourselves in the sense of like those that are not budget related. We convey that message, because back and forth on that with such a tight time frame it's going,
Yes.
that itself will cause more confusion.
All right. So further discussion on that. So is this the goal here to come to a
No, I mean, this is kind of the
direction we're headed in?
Direction we're headed
Right.
in, what we pulled together from the finance
good.
committee
So we'll
meeting.
hear from our-
Ultimately, you're going to use it
Yeah.
for the budget calendar
Right.
next
I'm
year.
just going to say we've got a budget calendar approval in here in the fall, and then we'll get feedback from the RTM subcommittees.
Yeah, so I think
Board
we're
of
kind
Finance.
of done with it for now until budget, with
Good.
input from, until we get the budget calendar.
But good work. Thank you very much. We'll move on quickly to first reading and discussion of proposed revisions to Board of Education policies. 2700 policy regarding retention of electronic records and information, 3125 purchasing, 3150 school activity funds, 4111 non-discrimination, 4118 policy regarding prohibition of sexual discrimination and sexual harassment in the workplace, personnel, 4025 reports of suspected abuse or neglect of children or reports of sexual assault of students by school employees, 4050 reports of suspected abuse or neglect of adults with intellectual disability or autism spectrum disorder, 4075 alcohol, tobacco, and drug-free workplace, 4450 policy regarding employees in section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, in parentheses, new policy. So I'll turn that over to Marge and Dave.
So Duke, we met at the policy subcommittee on the 21st. Marge was kind enough to walk through each of these items in detail. The 8 of these are either modifications, repeal and replace based on statutory changes from Shipman and Goodman recommended by their model policy, or stylistic changes, except for the final policy, which is new. Again, that's a statutory change. She prepared a memo, which also outlines the purpose for all of these changes, including everybody's board packet as a red line of these changes. Would kindly request that everyone take a review if anyone has any questions for Marge or myself, and we will hopefully see these for a second reading at the next board meeting.
Good. Thank you. Always a lot of work on the policy side. Thank you, Marge. Dave, Jill.
I had one question about the update to the purchasing policy. It specifies a relationship between ourselves and town in an instance where they provide a good or service that is less expensive than what we did. Can you talk about the impact on our work?
Sure. So we already share the same accounting system, Munis, which does payroll and accounts payable, which the policy references. We also already share the same insurance policy. We share KERMA for our workers' comp, general liability, auto, property. And then in most instances, things like paving a service, we usually try to piggyback off Public's work if possible. So a lot of the stuff is already really in place and has been in place for a while.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so this will come back for further review and approval. All right, good. Marge, anything you want to state on the personnel report?
Right, so for those of you who know Chris Skaggs, you know he's too young to retire. He's moving out of the area, so he's just resigning.
Okay, all right, good. We'll move on. We have one action item here. Action on non-renewal of certified staff working under one-year contracts, long-term substitutes, and permanent building substitutes. Dr. Dudley?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, yes, sir. For this particular item, I'm recommending that the contract of employment for Catherine Perez Anton not be renewed for the following year upon its expiration at the end of the 2022-23 school year for performance reasons.
Okay. May I have a motion that the contract of employment of Catherine Perez Anton not be renewed for the following year upon its expiration at the end of the 2022-2023 school year, and that the superintendent of schools is directed to advise such person in writing of this action? May I have a motion? Dennis, second. John Cini, all those in favor? That is Cini, Best, Katie, Maroney, Jill, Deneen, Sarah, and Worm. Any abstentions? And Dave Brown abstaining. Thank you. Michelle, we'll move back to public comment.
Good evening. Anyone in person would like to participate? Please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Catherine Perez Antoine. And I live in 138 Silver Mine in Norwalk, Connecticut. I just want to say that it's really unfortunate that I'm on my way out as Dr. Dad is on her way in. I was really excited about her position. During our meeting on Friday, we had a mindfulness reflection sheet. We did a DBT activity together where all the members, all the psychologists and social workers were asked to look at the roles or highlight a success of something that happened at the workplace, the thorn or the challenge and experience that we had that we can use more support with. And then the bud, which were the new ideas of something that we're looking to forward to and understanding more. And during that time, I took notes on what my peers had said were the roles. One of the things that I shared was that coming from New York City Public Schools, I never thought that an IEP could truly be individualized. And I have to say, you guys rocked it. I mean, it's really amazing to see how all the data that is collected on the students' performance is used to inform decisions to meeting children's needs. So I'm very proud to be part of that for even if it's only a few months. I also noticed that here in Darien, all the staff are really genuinely hardworking. Again, coming from New York City Department of Education, often you just have a handful of people that are basically carrying the school on their back. Everybody else is, just burnt out and kind of gave up. And it's really nice to be part of a team where everybody's really working together and everybody's putting in the extra time, extra hours, giving up lunches, giving up preps, staying after school, coming in early so that we can meet the kids, the needs of the kids. And I think we're all happy to do it. And the other thing is that I feel like everyone really genuinely cares about the mental health and welfare of all the students. So again, I'm grateful for that experience. Some of the thorns that we identified, and again, this is not just myself, there's also my colleagues, is the lack of adequate support, staffing, training for mental health staff members. So that includes the guidance counselors, the school psychologists, and the social workers. The unrealistic expectations, timelines, and workload. In the 5 months, I just made 6 months that I was working there, I did over 150 meetings. I tested 25 kids. That includes children with 504s.
Thank you. You're at time. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Any other public comment? Michelle, anyone online?
If anyone online would like to participate in public comment, please use the raised hand icon. There are no raised hands at this time.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Sini, second by Mr. Maroney. All those in favor?